What's up YouTube, this is Tubedigga. In this video I'm going to show you my favourite chopping technique. This is the most simple and effective way I've found to chop long musical samples as an example and get some really nice effective chops that work well together and of course alongside any beats that you program. Before I get into this video I just want to thank all my current subscribers, anyone that's liked and shared my videos, anyone that's been kind enough to donate to the channel. If you'd like to do that yourselves, there's a PayPal link in the description, or you can simply go to PayPal and just donate to tubedigga@gmail.com and I'll be forever grateful. If not, no worries at all. If you're interested in private lessons with myself, please also contact me at tubedigga@gmail.com. So first of all, we're going to go to the browser and I'm going to choose this prog jazz album by Jose Privsek and it's called Rizonke. Or Rizank, I'm not too sure. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. Now we don't need to load it to a pad at this moment, so we can just load it straight into memory. Now I'm going to press and hold menu and press pad 14, so we're in the program editor of our default drum program 001. I'm just going to go up to the zones window here and choose all pads. So we've highlighted all of the pads in pad bank A. I'm just going to close that. I'm going to take a look at layer 1 and this is where I'm going to load in this prog jazz album. So now we've got that on all of the first 16 pads in pad bank A. The next thing I'm going to do is go to my zones and now I'm going to deselect all the even pads, which are these ones here. So we've just selected the odd pads 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13 and 15. Just going to close that. Make sure I select layer 2. I'm just going to make sure it's set up before I load in a kick drum. So let's go to the browser. I'm going to load in kick. So type in kick into the search bar. I'm going to go to Dark Parallax. That's one of my favourite expansions for kicks. And I'm just going to load in this simple kick. I'm going to make sure that I don't have any pads selected because I don't want to load it to a pad because it will load it over the top of that sample on layer 1. When you're dealing with layers, you can't load samples onto specific layers. It'll load it onto the first layer. So I just want to load it into memory. Let's just choose a snare while we're here. That's great. That's one of my favorite snares. Let's load that in. So let's go back to the program editor, press and hold menu, pad 14. And let's load that kick drum to all our odd numbered pads as we've got highlighted here, and let's put it on layer 2. So now we've got a kick drum on all these pads here. Let's go back to the edit zones, take these ones out, and now let's choose these pads, which are our even number pads. Let's close that, make sure we're in layer 2 again, and move the data wheel up twice, and now we've got a snare drum on all the other pads. The next thing I'm going to do is go up here and make sure we've now selected both odd and even number pads. So that's all pads in pad bank A. Go to LFO modulation and let's change the mute group for all these pads to the same, which is mute group 1. Now these pads will choke each other, and I'm just going to go back to the zones and switch the current because now we want to edit the actual musical sample for each pad individually. So let's choose our first pad. We've got a kick drum on there now. And now we can start adjusting the start point of the musical sample and find some nice sections to use. That's quite nice. Now let's choose the snare next to it. Now I'm just choosing complementary portions of this music where the chords kind of work well, so okay, let's choose the next kick and the next snare, and you can see how quickly I can go through this. Let's choose the next kick drum. Next snare drum. I'm choosing similar sounds to the previous ones. Okay, and we've just got 8 more pads to do. Let's quickly go through those. Choose a very similar one for this kick drum. So the reason why I'm kind of choosing similar ones is so our entire beat sounds consistent. So eventually I'm going to program in a pattern so all these kind of interlock and work well together. Some of them might not work because I'm not testing the beat at the moment. I'm just trying to find some decent chops. And let's okay, so we've got a chop assigned to every pad now, a different section of this long sample. So this is really great because we've got a kick and a snare that's going to trigger these different sections of the long musical sample or this album. And that means that we've got flexibility in the tempo as well. So we can play a beat like this. So hopefully you get the idea what's happened here. We're just triggering sections off and it's hitting at exactly the same time as our beat. So it means that we don't also have to worry about getting perfectly timed loops. So let's program this in. I'm going to program this over 8 bars. So just double length. I've gone up too far there to 16. Let's just undo. So we've got 8. So I'm going to program this beat in, do some slight variations in the actual pattern. And then let's look at adjusting these chops so they're a bit better, because as you've seen, I've quickly run through those chops for the sake of this video. Let's just reduce the tempo down to 90 beats per minute. That's good. So that one's off. Let's go to Program Editor, and it's just a simple matter of finding a separate section or an additional section that works well now. Wasn't too sure about this. That might work. This one's a little bit off. I'm not too happy with the chord that's been selected there. Now sometimes these odd ones that are in completely different areas of this entire album might work, but I haven't got time to select that. I just want to quickly select ones for the purposes of this video. So let's listen to these ones that I've changed now. So let's change that one. It's not too bad, but because it's the last pad essentially in the whole loop, because we've essentially used all 16 pads to create the full loop as I've moved up through the pads. So let's just make that something a bit more significantly like the end. That might be a bit better. So I'm not going to do much more on that, guys. I just wanted to show you the basic way to set this up. So you've got kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, so on and so forth. But on every pad, you've got the same musical sample. Because it's a long sample from an album, it enables me to just use the start point and scan through really quickly to find different sections or chops that work well with one another. Now, quite often you can find a section that you really like the actual tonal quality or the texture of that sample and adjust the pitch to match the other samples. So it doesn't matter if you've changed the key of the original sample away from another pad, because that might just be occurring in another position in this entire album anyway. So you can do things like that, match it with the semitones, you can filter stuff because they're all on individual pads. But you do have to be wary of filtering, because obviously you've got a kick and a snare on that pad. So what you might want to do is remove the kick or the snare, do your filtering, and then flatten the pad. You're going to want to flatten these pads at some point because you've got this huge long sample loaded into memory, and you're going to want to reduce the amount of RAM that's being used up. So what I do is choose my pad here, and I can simply go to the second tab of the samples page and just turn down the kick. So what we could do is choose, again, multiple zones, or in fact we could choose all zones, and as long as we're focused on the second layer, we can just turn down the volume for all pads. That's the quickest way. Let's come back out of that. So now we've just got our musical chops. The kick and the snare will have gone now. So this bit is the most laborious bit. It's just a case of choosing every single pad and bringing your start, or your end point, sorry, back to the start point and selecting enough material that you're happy with. So that's too long, but you might want to keep that because that's quite a nice intro. So let's just do that. I'm going to flatten that pad. Take off the tail to 0 seconds, we don't need the tail. Let's go to the next pad. That's enough. So you want to give yourself a couple of seconds maybe on each of these to give you a bit more flexibility of how long you can play with the sample, if you know what I mean. So we just need that section there. So I'm not going to do all of these, but I just want to show you the process, really. Okay, so let's say we've done that for all our pads and we're left with short samples on each of these pads. Then we would simply go up to here and press purge, and that will purge that long sample out of the memory. It's not going to do it at the moment because obviously I've not adjusted the individual start and end points for all of these. I've just adjusted the start points. So once you've isolated your sections with your start and end points and you've flattened all the pads, like I said, go to purge this big sample out of memory, and then you can simply go back to all zones, close, go to layer 2, make sure you're on the second tab of the samples page here, and then you can just bring your snare and your kick back into the mix. The other thing to remember is once you've flattened the pad, you are going to have to once again load the kick drum onto those pads that you flattened. So if you've done all of them, you just need to repeat that process of going back to multiple, just choosing the odd pads, loading the kick drum back onto those. That's if you are flattening them. You can flatten them together, but just bear in mind you're going to have a kick drum and the musical sample hard baked into the same sample which can't be removed. Although you will have the kick and the snare as separate samples if you haven't purged them out of memory. The other thing to remember is once you play back again, you want to set all your pads back to the same mute group, because when you flatten a pad, it resets all parameters. So you're going to get things clashing if you don't set it back to the same mute group. But that's the most efficient way I find to find loads of different chops, loads of different sonic material from one big sample that you can use and make it all sound nicely in context. And it makes it sound a lot more together and less disconnected. Also, don't forget you've got all your additional pad banks. You don't have to have those set to the same mute group as the kick and the snare. So you can go back up here, change it back to current. And as an example, we can choose the first pad in bank D and just put a hi-hat on there. Because it's not set to the same mute group, that hi-hat can be played over all of your other content, and of course any other percussion or any other samples that you want to layer over the top. You've only really got to watch out for your first bank where you've got all your main samples that you want to be choking one another. And you can play loads of different patterns, loads of different hits. You can actually find some really interesting odd rhythmic sections that work well. So this is the other really good thing, is having the kick and the snare triggering all your chops essentially locks in any odd timing. So it kind of solves the problem that I see a lot of people have, is how they can get their loops and chops timed up. You don't have to have those chops and loops timed perfectly. In this regard particularly not, because the kick and the snare are kind of forcing it into your own rhythm and kind of correcting that by default. So at the time of making this video, guys, it is the 10th of June 2019. Please don't forget, on June the 12th 2019 at 8 PM Eastern Summer Time, I'm running a free live performance workshop for the MPC X, MPC Live and MPC Touch. There's a link in the description of this video to that, and there's a pinned comment. So please click on the link, get yourself registered. There's going to be some great, interesting content in that training session and some other exciting stuff too. So please sign up for that, guys. And thanks for watching this video. I will see you on the next one. This is Tubedigga, and I'm out.